It is a great honor for me to be here with all of you at Georgia College, where I've had a really remarkable day. And it's wonderful to be here for a forum on leadership. Leadership is the topic that I have probably found myself thinking the most about over the course of my adult life. Today I lead a foundation in North Carolina that was established on the eve of Thanksgiving in 1945. After the Second World War, by a 75-year-old industrialist, John Morehead III, who had seen the ravages of the war and come to believe that the single greatest factor that could influence the world's future was leadership. And so he put all of his assets into trust to, quote, invest in those endowed by their creator with the capacity for leadership. Because, quote, leadership fosters thriving societies. Unquote. I suppose I was considered an appropriate person to lead this work because of the 2 decades I previously spent building a leadership development institution in Africa. And for my prepared remarks before Q&A on absolutely anything or everything on my journey, I would like to speak about that work in particular. I grew up in circumstances that I imagine were not too dissimilar from many of your own. A childhood in a medium-sized town, Kalamazoo, Michigan. A public school education, a first job in Cincinnati, Ohio. But for 22 years now, I've been working to bring to life a unique educational institution in Johannesburg, South Africa, called African Leadership Academy. We bring together the most promising future leaders from all backgrounds at age 17. And they come together to live and learn together for 2 years before going off to universities all over the world. The Academy began as a dream shared by myself and one of my very best friends, Fred, who is from Ghana. And we believe that the most important enabler of peace and prosperity in Africa, anywhere, in fact, was the quality of the continent's leadership. We believe that we could build a unique, mission-driven educational institution that would nurture and develop leaders. And if we could get this right, that those leaders could enable lasting peace and shared prosperity in their home communities and indeed across their continent and around the world. Over 18 years now, 2,000 young people have come through our doors. They've come from Morocco to Madagascar, all over Africa. They've been the children of famous diplomats and also orphans of armed conflict. All have been selected for their potential for leadership. We built ALA, as we call it, to develop leaders. We believe that leadership could be learned. We sought to build something great and lasting. And we imagined ourselves each day, as I shared with the class earlier, as cathedral builders, laying brick by brick the foundation for an inspirational space that would mold leaders across generations to shape the world's youngest continent. But the process of building African Leadership Academy taught me more about leadership than I probably ever imagined it would. It's reshaped how I think about and engage with the world and how I think about others. And so this is what I hope I will use this Usery Forum to speak a little bit about. See, I arrived in Africa, as you've heard, with fancy degrees, with a powerful U.S. passport, with some experience, with some networks, frankly, a false confidence, a false sense of security. I believe that with adequate time and resources, I could solve any problem. I had access to exclusive communities. I quickly met some of the most influential people on the continent. My identity, my privilege, I suppose, commanded a certain respect. It's easy to fall into the trap of believing that you have all the answers. And certainly it was easy for me to imagine, recognize, and evaluate leadership in criteria like my own. Can someone write English with precision? Can they evaluate data and capture insights? Have they read widely? Do they have a firm handshake and look you in the eye? These are the things I learned to value from my parents, from my teachers at Amberley Elementary and at Portage Northern. They're important. I valued them. I still do. But I'd like to tell you about two young men who changed my conception of leadership. Their names are Joseph Munyambanza and Ntakamaze Nzianvira. When I met them, they were 18-year-old boys about your age, refugees from the Congo, living in the Changwali refugee settlement on the shores of Lake Albert in western Uganda. Their families had fled armed conflict when they were young children. And these two young men had made their way through overfilled local schools by tilling fields for farmers on weekends and pooling their resources. They scraped by every day, committed to making something of themselves, to serving their families, to serving their community. To be very clear, Joseph and Ntakamaze's written English was objectively poor. Their mathematical fluency was surely behind that of the average American 8th grader. Their school grades as 16-year-olds were okay at best. I don't think any of you would be particularly excited to send their report card home to your parents. They did not project a particular confidence when they spoke. They didn't really meet any of the markers of leadership on first glance that I had been taught to look for. But they came to African Leadership Academy in our first year, strongly recommended by a social services organization that we knew well. A local man in Uganda wrote to me in 2008 saying, "You will never regret inviting Joseph to your academy." I trusted him. So we sent an offer of admission to the young refugee with the wonderful smile, the photograph with the hoe, the poor grades, but the tremendous story of grit and commitment fostered in this environment, the Changwali refugee camp. 2 years later, Joseph graduated from African Leadership Academy. He was much loved by his peers for reasons we'll get into in a moment. But universities across the world looked at Joseph according to his limitations. Admissions officers saw him as a risk, and as an expensive one at that. He came from a non-traditional background. He required full financial aid. He didn't interview particularly well because he was quiet and deferent. Difficult at times for an admissions officer from a university to understand. His examinations grades after 2 years at ALA weren't that great either. While universities saw D's on his A-level exams, which would be like a set of 2s on AP courses, they thought he can't compete. But I didn't feel that way. I'd seen someone who covered the content of at least 4 years of school in just 2 years and managed to pass some of the most rigorous exams in the world. In fact, I'd never seen anyone in my life learn as voraciously as Joseph Munyambanza. I and our team were committed to ensuring that Joseph could make his dream of university education come through. But it took us 18 months to find him a university place. He was desperate to go to university, such that he could show others in his refugee camp community what they could achieve as well. I called on every member of our network. I wrote long personal emails about this amazing young man to universities all over the world, asking if they would just give him a chance. And ultimately, he was given a chance by a small school in Missouri called Westminster College, a liberal arts school that has many similarities to this one. Once he got there, Joseph graduated a semester early with a 3.9 GPA in biochemistry, voted by the faculty as the outstanding senior in their graduating class of 2015. Buoyed by Joseph's success and transition, his best friend, Ntakamaze, gained access to the University of Rochester, where he completed a degree in mechanical engineering. They were the first from the Chiang Valley refugee settlement to come to the United States not as resettled refugees, but as university students. The first to return home as university graduates. Today, I consider them some of my greatest role models and teachers in the world. I can tell you with conviction that the quality and depth of Joseph and Ntakamaze's teaching, their ability to mobilize individuals and resources, is perhaps more impressive than anyone I've met in my life. They are the epitome of a social entrepreneur. By the time these boys were 18, and before they finished high school, they built a primary school in the refugee camp, the Kaburawas International Primary School. Today, that primary school is the top-performing refugee school in Africa. Tens of other schools have been spun out on Joseph and Ntakamaze's model. But more to the point, their school is one of the best schools I've ever visited in my life. And I've spent much of the past 20 years visiting schools. I now understand that if I, the guy with the fancy degrees and privileged passport, had tried to build a school in Changwali refugee camp, I would have spent not 10, not 100, probably 1,000 times as much money and been lucky to get half the results. Children leave the refugee camp now for college in droves, following the lead of their heroes, Joseph and Ntakamaze, and those who followed them. And that's not all. They've also built women's empowerment groups, a microfinance entity, other small businesses, all empowering other young people, transforming their community. Because leadership is the lever for transformation. They're friends and collaborators, in fact, of people who I've never met and would love to. They speak regularly with Gordon Brown, the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, with Malala Yousafzai, the Nobel Peace Prize winner. They even speak periodically with 50 Cent, who sponsors students at their primary school. Why have I just told you a long story about Joseph and Ntakamaze? Well, there are two reasons. First, I wonder how many people like Ntakamaze or Joseph have crossed your path here in Milledgeville or in your hometown. And when they do, how do you respond? Will you write them off because they don't meet the high bar of a leader in the ways in which you imagine leadership? Or will you pause, get to know them, recognize their difference, not better, not worse, imagining their abundant potential? Second, I wonder if each of you has taken the time to really imagine what leadership looks like or sounds like for you. When I say leader or change maker or genius, who do you think of? How do they look? How do they sound? Perhaps you thought of Martin Luther King or of Bill Gates. My guess is you're imagining people who might look a certain way, who might sound a certain way, who might carry a certain passport. When we imagine that as our conception of leadership, how many people are we ignoring? Like me, each of you is immensely privileged. You probably recognize yourselves as beneficiaries of extraordinary education here, but you might not realize every day just how few people in the world, just a couple percent, have the opportunity to access a university with resources even close to the ones here at Georgia College. You likely know that you will be members of a community of alumni with all the privileges and access that entails. Many of you are men in a global society that still wrongly prizes our contributions over those of our sisters. Such a privilege can induce blinders. It can cause you to recognize and imagine merit in others in the ways in which you demonstrate it amongst your closest friends or peers. In so doing, it can cause you to miss extraordinary individuals and their contributions in front of your very eyes. Your brain and its unconscious biases risk preventing you from seeing the magic in others who are all around you. One day, perhaps today, you will come across a Joseph or an Ntakamaze. Will you pay them any mind? Will you be turned off by their slow and deliberate way of speaking? Will you lean in, pause, and listen? Will you see their limitations as writers and mathematicians as evidence that they are not the kind of leader that's worth your time? Or will you see them as prospective partners in creating something great, for which their strengths and experiences can only complement your own, as you build something that transforms the communities around you? My career, my time in Africa, have taught me, above all, that leadership is an abundant resource. It does not only come in the package you might be accustomed to seeing, or that my culture trained me to value. But when we see leadership as abundant, when we dare to imagine not only the equal humanity of every person, but also the equal agency and equal potential, no problem is too big for us. I hope you all will go forward with the humility to recognize in others, of all backgrounds, across your hometown and across the world, a potential that is equal to your own, and then you will dare to imagine what you can create together. If we want to go fast, we go alone. But if we want to go far, we will go together. Thank you very much.
Just hearing you speak, you're so cool. You're just so passionate about what you do. And obviously, it sounds from what you told us, it wasn't an easy beginning. I'm sure there were times, whether it was starting ALA or whether it was, working with these two young gentlemen, that you were met with some resistance and people saying, no, this isn't a good idea, or that's not going to work. So can you just kind of dive more into that and talk about overcoming what other people thought and how you persevered and endured through that?
Yes. Okay. So this is an opportunity to talk maybe a little bit about how we bring things to life. Big picture. How do you create something like ALA, I mean, for perspective, at ALA over 20 years, we've raised about $250 million for this effort to develop transformational leaders for Africa. Right? That sounds wonderful. It is not an overnight success. You do not go from having from nothing to build ALA. How do you build something like ALA? Well, you build something smaller first, and you build something smaller before that, and smaller before that, and smaller before that. So the way you get to the position where you can bring something like ALA to life is that you bring other things to life that give you the creative confidence to try things that are more and more audacious. So if I were to go back, I'd say, when I was a high school student, I created a new sports team at my high school. It didn't exist before. And then after college, I remember I started a job training program at a homeless shelter. And that was an entrepreneurial experience that then prepared me to start what became the pilot for ALA, which was a summer camp. And after we'd successfully run the summer camp and demonstrated our ability to do this work, people were willing to support us in our effort to build the school. And even in supporting us to build the school, I must note that for most of the first few years, we measured our cash in weeks, sometimes in days, not in years. Right? This was a challenging journey throughout. But the reality is, we were on this journey together. We had a group of people who we had drawn to a mission and a vision of lasting peace and shared prosperity through leadership, who have become some of my closest friends in the world. Right? And because we were on this journey together, it felt often difficult with lots of rejection, but it never felt lonely. Right? And we believed that, well, I said earlier, I learned very quickly that I could certainly not solve most of the problems. We, together, could share our strength and actually get through anything. And that's how we have grown and evolved ALA to where it is today.
On the same note, the African Leadership Academy, what would you say has been the most meaningful or impactful lesson you have learned from the development of the program?
I think so. I just shared, in thinking about what I want to share today, right? One of the most powerful lessons I learned is exactly this point that leadership is an abundant resource, right? And I think when we organize ourselves to imagine leadership as an abundant resource, right, we can accomplish anything, right? Many of the students who came to ALA were stunningly brilliant and profoundly gifted, and yet fundamentally locked out of the next educational opportunities in their own countries because their grades weren't high enough. But they were in an environment in which their grades were a function of household wealth more than anywhere else in the world, because whether your family had resources determined whether you got to go to school at all, and whether the school that you went to had a qualified teacher. And so often, students were not able to reach their potential through no fault of their own. This is a challenge that we face here in America also, right? And we all must, I think, have the courage to imagine that leadership is an abundant resource. I think the other point that I want to make sure we all remember is the one that I put on the screen last, which is that if you want to go far, you have to go together. I shared with the class earlier today that so much of building something great is having the courage to surround yourself with people who are way smarter than you, right? And the beauty of building at ALA, building it at the age we did, was that there were lots of things we knew we didn't know. There were even more things that we didn't know we didn't know. Right? And the only way you can build something great is by bringing people onto your mission, getting people to get onto your bus, right? Who have exposure to things that corrects for your blind spots, right? And once you get those people on the bus, you can accomplish anything. And a lot of those people who could address the things I didn't know were from backgrounds very, very different than myself. Either culturally, right? The system that they had grown up in, or from the disciplinary background they had, the career experience they had. And the alchemy comes where all of those different people come together and support each other, because every one of us has blind spots.
I have a quick question. So you just discussed how important it is for collaboration when we all come from different backgrounds. So I want to talk about your background for a minute. I know we talked earlier, you went to Yale, majored in economics, and was on the swim team as well. So can you just talk about your collegiate experience and how you feel maybe going to Yale, being involved in the things that you were involved in, were helpful and set you up for your future career that you're in now, and also some things that you wish you had also had that would have helped you in your career now?
Yeah, you're teeing up something that I told you about earlier today, actually, Cassie, which is that. So I had the good fortune of being recruited to a place I never imagined going to college, because I was a very good athlete. I was a swimmer. And there was a very famous swim coach at Yale who wrote me a letter one day and asked if I'd be interested in taking a visit to the campus. And then I ended up going out east, and I never really imagined leaving the Midwest at some level. And I had an amazing experience there. But the reality is I didn't make the most of college for my first few years, because I approached college the way I approached high school. I tried to swim fast and get good grades. And what that meant was that I wasn't doing the things that actually foster transformational learning, which is about being uncomfortable. Right? Great learning happens when we step outside our comfort zone. And I wish that I had someone early in my university career who, instead of saying, "Oh, you're getting good grades, you're swimming hard," would have actually told me, like, "Hey, how are you trying to challenge yourself? What are some things you're doing this term that you've never done before?" Right? I wish I built relationships with adults in the way that you can on this campus, because your classes are so small. Right? And it was only in my senior year of college when I really started to nurture those relationships. And in that year, I grew more in my final year of college than the previous 3 years put together, as a result of the apprenticeship I had with elders on campus, the relationships I dared to build with adults who previously I found intimidating, and I was just trying to stay in my own lane. Right? And so in coming back to the U.S., one of the things that I thought the most about is this question: how we help college students make the most of college. How does every college student have an experience of college as it should be, which is about that type of mentorship. It's about embracing stretch and discomfort, right? I won't get it totally right. I'm aware that Jesse Jackson passed away a few days ago, and I remember watching Jesse Jackson give a speech at the Democratic National Convention. Back when we used to watch all of the conventions live, there weren't that many channels when I was young. I'm not that old. He had a speech. He closed the speech with something along the lines of, stress builds character. Right? Stress builds character. Right? And I think about how that is. It's great learning that is enabled by all of us being willing to be open to discomfort. And I hope all of you are leaning into that, including discomfort of building relationships with professors who have exposure to things and that you've never had before. Right? Are you approaching them? Are you having conversations about ideas, etc.?
Back to the your African Leadership Academy. What made you want to pick South Africa for the location of the program, and kind of what drew you to Africa?
Great. So I'll step back. My personal interest in South Africa came from reading a lot of newspapers and periodicals as a high school student. I found South Africa to be the most interesting place in the world during its democratic transition. I remember Nelson Mandela walking free from prison. I remember the South African elections. I remember the Nobel Peace Prize. I remember South Africa voluntarily disarming its nuclear arsenal. Right? I found all of these things fascinating, and I thought that was a fascinating place. When we built ALA, I know that Fred was from Ghana. We were technically free agents. We could have gone anywhere. We chose to place African Leadership Academy in South Africa, both because it had a democratic ideal, a constitutional governance that we found inspiring, it had a commitment to human rights, and because it had a level of economic development that meant that we had clean drinking water, an excellent airport, low disease rates, things that allowed us to be an attractive place to build a school. Today, the reality is there are many places where you could build an African Leadership Academy on the African continent. The continent's advanced dramatically over the past 2 decades, but there's still more to be done.
You spoke a lot about being on the side where you are the person recognizing other people, but the student's question is, what words of advice would you have for an individual whose leadership skills or potential would not be considered traditional or the status quo? So the person being on the other side.
So what advice would I have for someone who is not maybe is not naturally recognized as a leader? What it is, one, everyone has something to offer the world. Every one of us has something to offer the world. Two, the things that we have to offer the world are a function of our deepest curiosities. Right? And the things that we are willing to commit ourselves fully to and work hard for. Right? If you identify something you are willing to commit yourself fully to anywhere in your life, and it reflects something that you are deeply curious about, right? You will almost certainly become viewed as a leader in that community for the unique contributions that you make to that space. Right? Now, one thing I worry about is many college students are told, I think, all the time, often wrongheadedly, to discover their passion, right? And they feel intense pressure to have discovered that and be able to describe the perfect LinkedIn profile, sense of personal mission for themselves when they're 18 or when they're 20 or when they're 22. I don't know that you can actually know all those things about yourself yet, right? I don't think it's fair to you to imagine yourself having to know exactly what it is you're most deeply curious about and willing to commit the world to, commit yourself to at this point in your journey, right? After all, my first job was selling laxatives, right? And that became the perfect first job for an entrepreneurial career spent building educational institutions, right? Why? Right? Because I was learning things. So the really important thing for you to do right now, to develop as a leader, right, is to gain exposure to a range of things that you think you might find interesting, or that you feel, that should be something worth learning about, right? And this includes both topics and subjects, but it also includes gaining exposure to yourself in a range of different types of situations. Right? Join different clubs and student organizations and play different types of roles in them. Lead from the front. Follow. Create something new. Try to improve something that already exists. Right? Through all of these different types of experiences, you will gain both. You will gain knowledge of yourself, not only in terms of the things that you find curious, but also the ways in which you work and serve most effectively as a leader. And if you do those things, I'm confident that every one of you will grow to be recognized as a transformational leader, and the work you ultimately discover is worthy of your deepest passions and pursuits.
On the topic of leadership, since you've held many different roles from Procter & Gamble to then the ALA to then Morehead Foundation, how would you say your leadership style, ideology has kind of evolved throughout your experiences and just through all you have done?
So it's a really good question. One of the things that I find really interesting is that I have experienced an inverse relationship between competence and confidence. Right? I am more capable today than I've ever been. Right? There are more things that I know about myself, know how to do through different types of experiences that I've had. Right? But the reality is I'm also more and more aware of all of the things that I am not particularly good at, or the best person in any given room or any given team at. And so one of the things that I find is that more and I spend less time trying to have all the answers and charge from the front, and more time just trying to figure out who the right people are to put on the most challenging problems and most important problems that the face teams are on. And my prevailing assumption is that I am rarely the right person. Right? What I am good at is helping to frame the big picture problem, right? And how we might go about approaching it, so that we can define the problem that the right person can solve.
You've talked a lot about collaboration and community tonight and just the importance of those together. We've had a lot of questions come in from the audience, such as, how did you build your network and connections, and do you have any tips for maintaining those bonds?
Okay, this is great. So I'm naturally pretty introverted. I'm not the best person to have at a cocktail party. Most of my networking is through actually personal relationships and conversations. The best thing that can happen for me in building a network is to have someone agree to go for coffee or for a meal. Right. So that we can have a deeper conversation about the things that we're interested in. Often I've been asked this question by people who imagine themselves as building something in the future. And building something is about building credibility, right? Like ultimately you want to get people to back your idea in some way, or people to join your team. The reason they will choose to do that is because they experience you as credible in some way. And so I've thought a lot about what makes you credible. And I think credibility is a function of two variables, right? The first is integrity, and the second is delivery, right? So credibility is a function of integrity and delivery. Right? Do you do the things that you said you were going to do? Right? Are you morally consistent in that way? That's integrity. Second, that's delivery, right? Do you do the things that you're going to say you're going to do? Second is like, are you honest and straightforward with people as you are going through the world and morally upright in your dealings? That's integrity, right? So what I learned in raising money and building support for African Leadership Academy was that I would have a meeting with someone. I would introduce myself. I would talk about the work that we were trying to do. I would describe why I found it both important and personally meaningful. I would ask that person for advice on problems that I was facing. Not imagined problems, but real problems. Because I was deeply interested in what their perspective would be. And then at the end of the coffee, I learned that what I would do is I would summarize, okay, so here are the ideas you have for how I might address these problems. I'm going to think about these as I move forward. Would you be interested in meeting again in 3 months? And typically, if they had enjoyed meeting me, they would say yes. And then I would say, great, in 3 months, I look forward to reporting back on this problem that I discussed with you. And I hope that in 3 months, I will also be able to talk to you about X, which is the thing that we hope that is the next thing on our project plan to deliver over the next 3 months. Okay? 3 months later, schedule a meeting with someone. Come back to them and first say, so I was talking to you last time about this problem. Maybe it was about hiring the dean, right? You had this advice. And then I would tell them, this is how we chose to go forward. And why? Often, that was not necessarily what they advised. But what they learned about me was that I would engage them with integrity. I would honor their feedback and provide a clear rationale for what we did. And then I said, I also told you last time that we were going to be working, that I wanted to be able to talk about this. Here's the progress that we made. And then I would say, now I got some problems on this too. And I would ask them for their advice on those problems. And they would give me feedback. And then I would say, can we meet again in 3 months? Repeat. What happens over that is someone gets to know you over 2 or 3 meetings, over 6 or 9 months. And what they learn about you is that you do the things you said you were going to do. And you engage them with honesty and clarity. Right? They experience you as having integrity and delivery. Right? And as a result, they want to get onto your train. The best way for them to get off the bus is if they experience something about you that calls your integrity into question. Right? You spend your whole life building a reputation for your character. It only takes one small action for that to be undermined. Right? And so that type of engagement is how I have experienced to be most effective in building my network and getting people on board for the things that we want to do.
We've been talking a lot about leadership and obviously your experience within it as well. Since you've led both the ALA and the Morehead-Cain Foundation, how would you say your definition of leadership has evolved across the different cultural and institutional contexts? Since one is a U.S.-based foundation and one was in Africa.
I don't think it has. I actually think we've been pretty clear and consistent on what a leader is throughout this journey. A leader is an agent of positive change. An agent of positive change whose efforts improve the well-being of others. Right? That's what I see a leader as. Right? I don't think about leaders in terms of the way in which leaders will all have different styles, right? But what they will have in common is that they will be an agent of positive change whose efforts will improve the well-being of others, who will foster thriving communities wherever they are. And I think that definition, that idea of leadership, is sufficiently flexible for it to apply across any context, anywhere. I mean, we learned the same thing about our values. Right? When we started ALA, we were clear about our vision, lasting peace and shared prosperity in Africa. We were clear about our mission, right? Developing leaders who would work together to create that vision. And we were clear about our values: integrity, humility, curiosity, compassion, diversity, and excellence. We define each of those values in 8 words or less. And what we have found is that those ideas resonate across cultures, across religious traditions, across circumstances all over the world. And I think that has worked in our favor. Unfortunately, we tested those things in the process of bringing ALA off the ground in a way that gave us a lot of confidence. one of the reasons that I was attracted to Morehead-Cain is I want to turn my eye towards university students in the U.S. and transition leadership at ALA to an African leader, was that the Morehead-Cain Foundation has this beautifully written trust document, right? Invest in those endowed by their creator with the capacity for leadership, because leadership creates thriving communities. And that is sufficiently flexible and to have stood the test of time for over 80 years, right? 80 years past Thanksgiving. That to me is really exciting, right? And the question is now, how do we invest our resources in a way that is fit for purpose at this time, right, and in this place?
Yeah, I think we have about time for two more questions. Maybe I can go and then Bridget can take us home. But my question to you is one that we like to ask all our Usery Forum speakers, and that is, if you had a book to recommend to us that is a must-read, what would that one book be for you? Or a podcast, or something along those lines?
So I consume a lot of content. So it depends on what I would recommend for a varied audience. I think in the context of the talk today, one thing that I might recommend is Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist. Which is a very, very easy to read story, but it's a story, but it is about a journey of self-discovery. And I think that it can be a really helpful story to read when you are at the age that you are right now. So I'll go with that. Happy to provide a longer reading list. Can I share one other thing very briefly? There is a blog post from 2006 by a gentleman named Bill Shore. Bill Shore founded a nonprofit called Share Our Strength, which is one of the largest hunger alleviation organizations in the United States. And he took a sabbatical. And on his sabbatical, he went and he sat in cathedrals. He sat in great cathedrals every day for several months. And he wrote a letter back to his supporters called Letter from the Cathedral of Milan. This is very short. It's 3 pages long. But it talks about cathedral building. And one of the things I wonder day to day as I move through my life here is why we don't build cathedrals anymore. Cathedrals used to be built over hundreds of years. Right? I think the Cathedral of Milan was built over something like 650 years on the foundations of previous efforts. Generation after generation after generation would work on the cathedral, knowing that they would not ultimately see it completed. And evidence suggests that enhanced their effort, didn't undermine it. Right? I think we as a society are crying out for the opportunity to work together to build something greater than ourselves. And I think for all of us to take a moment to look into our human history and think about the work of those cathedral builders is valuable. So Bill Shore's letter from the Cathedral on, I will share that with Professor Mock in the event that you were interested.
I love that. I'll definitely have to give that a read. I think one last question we'll probably ask you is, what is one piece of advice, or kind of like a last word for us that you can give to all of us as college students that you'd like to leave us with before you leave?
We always and only learn through difficulty, and failure is a part of the process. Right? It is easy for me to describe ALA as a story that you all hear as one of success. Today, in 2 African countries, The youngest person ever elected to national office is a graduate of African Leadership Academy, who I first met when they were 16. Right. Some weeks ago, one of our alums was on the cover of Forbes for having Africa's most promising startup. Right. Two of our alums won Rhodes scholarships in November. Right. You can hear all these things, and what you can hear from this is that the ALA is this unmitigated success story. Right. What you need to know is that everything that has created that has actually been a string of things that we've tried that have not worked, that have helped point us in the direction to what would. And I look at ALA today and ALA this year, and I see a whole bunch of things that aren't working particularly well. And I ask the current leadership, what are things we tried and failed at this year? And because they have a long list, I know that we're getting better. I'm concerned that American college students and American high school students are so fearful of failure that we undermine our own learning. Right? But we all learn through discomfort. And I've failed many times. Right? And I will continue to fail many times. And if I don't fail at a whole bunch of things this year, then I will have had a year of limited learning and self-satisfaction will undermine the aspirations that I carry. And so please don't be afraid to try things you've never tried. Please don't be afraid to be uncomfortable. Please don't be afraid to be stressed. Please remember that failure is part of the process.
Thank you, Mr. Bradford.
Thank you, Cassie.